I never thought my own son would publicly humiliate me, especially not in my own house, especially not after everything I'd sacrificed for him. The night started like any other family gathering. The dining room was warm with candlelight, the scent of roasted lamb and rosemary potatoes hanging in the air. I'd spent the afternoon helping my daughter-in-law Allison prepare the meal. She said she wanted everything perfect to celebrate Derek's big promotion to Senior VP of Product Development at a tech startup in Denver. I brought a bottle of Barolo from my personal collection. I'd been saving it for a special occasion. Apparently, that occasion was going to become unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Derek arrived late, as usual, talking loudly on his Bluetooth earpiece while everyone else had already sat down. He kissed his kids on the head, gave his wife a cursory nod, and poured himself a generous glass of the wine I'd brought before, even saying hello to me. "So, Dad," he said as he swirled the glass like a professional. "Still enjoying retirement? Must be nice. No meetings, no deadlines, no relevance." There it was, the first jab, wrapped in sarcasm and dipped in vintage ego. He flashed a grin and raised his glass like he was making a toast. "To a simpler time," he added, "when people still used tools instead of apps." I forced a smile. "Still making things with my hands. Just finished building a wooden bench for the backyard." Derek leaned back, placing his expensive loafers on the crossbar of the antique dining chair. "You really ought to think about getting with the times. We're in the era of smart homes and AI. Nobody cares about woodwork anymore." The table chuckled nervously. My daughter Beth gave me an apologetic glance, her husband Roger staring down at his plate, clearly uncomfortable. Mia, my 12-year-old granddaughter, shot Derek a disapproving look, then glanced at me with soft, worried eyes. "Grandpa made me a jewelry box last month," she said quietly. "It even has a secret compartment." "That's sweet," Derek replied with a dismissive wave of his hand. "But we should probably focus on real accomplishments. You know, things that scale." The air thickened. I tried to brush it off. I'd spent years biting my tongue, telling myself that keeping peace in the family was more important than pride. But then, Derek took another sip of wine and said something that made my grip tighten on the fork. "It must be weird, huh? Sitting at the table while the rest of us carry the weight. You're lucky, old man." "Derek," Allison whispered, eyes wide. "That's enough." He didn't stop. "No, seriously. Think about it. You just exist now. No stress, no pressure. Just a nice comfy ride till the end." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough to let me know that nobody was going to defend me. Not this time. I looked down at my plate. I saw the reflection of the chandelier shimmering on my water glass. And I remembered something. Something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. The urge to stand up for myself. I placed my fork down gently, looked across the table, and met my son's eyes. "You want to know what's weird, Derek?" I said, my voice steady. He paused, still holding his wine. "What's weird," I continued, "is paying for someone's mortgage, car leases, private school tuition, medical bills, and then being told you don't contribute." His glass froze midair. 12 years, Derek," I said, louder now. 12 years of silent support, and tonight that support ends." The silence that fell over the table was total. Allison covered her mouth with her hand. Beth looked like she might cry. Roger looked at Derek as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Mia blinked rapidly, clearly trying to understand. I stood up slowly, picked up my napkin, and placed it beside my plate. "I hope your company pays well, son," I added, "because starting tomorrow, you'll be paying for your own life." Derek's face turned pale. "What are you talking about?" "You heard me," I replied. "No more mortgage help. No more tuition checks. No more car leases or weekend getaways on my dime. The free ride is over." He rose from his seat, flustered, still trying to keep his usual smug tone. "This isn't the time or place for this kind of discussion." "No, Derek," I said, walking toward the door. "The time was years ago, when you started taking without thanking, when you mistook kindness for obligation. And tonight, I'm correcting that mistake." As I walked out into the cold Colorado air, I could hear him calling after me, but I didn't stop. Not this time. The gravel crunched under my boots as I reached my car. The drive home was quiet, save for the sound of wind and the low hum of the heater. I kept my hands steady on the steering wheel, not because I wasn't shaking inside, but because I'd been preparing for this moment for far too long. 12 years ago, my wife Rose passed away from ovarian cancer. She was the light of our family, warm, grounding, endlessly compassionate. On her deathbed, I'd made her a promise. "Don't worry about Derek and Beth. I'll make sure they're okay." And I did. I helped Beth through her divorce, paid for her therapy, helped her raise 2 kids with Roger, a man I still think is trying to find his place in the world. And Derek? He was struggling then, newly married, bouncing between jobs, trying to launch a business that failed after 2 years. I paid off his first bankruptcy quietly, bought their first family car, co-signed on their second home. I even covered the down payment when Allison went back to school for her MBA. They never asked. They didn't have to. I just did it. For Rose. For family. But something shifted around year 5. The gratitude dried up. The calls became less about connection and more about transaction. Can you help us out with this month's school fees? We're a little short for Allison's student loan. The kids need new laptops for school. You know how important tech is these days. At first, I told myself I didn't mind. That helping was its own reward. But when Christmas came around last year, and Derek gave a toast thanking the hard work and sacrifices we all make as a family, I realized he hadn't meant me. That night, I found the ledger I kept in my home office. I'm an engineer by trade, retired, but still meticulous. I had logged every transfer, every loan, every tuition check, color-coded, dated, tagged by purpose. Mortgage support, $325,000. Education expenses, 220, cero. Auto loans and leases, $80,000. Medical bills, $45,000. Vacations, gifts, miscellaneous, 112, zero. Total, $780, $2,000. And the man who benefited from all of it had the audacity to ask me how it felt to be irrelevant. I pulled into my driveway and stared at the porch light motion sensor triggered, like I'd installed years ago for Rose. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. I hung my coat, turned on the light in the study, and walked to my desk. I opened the drawer labeled Family Expenses and ran my fingers across the folders. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was awake. That dinner wasn't a confrontation. It was a liberation. I sat down and pulled out my checkbook. There was still a mortgage payment set to go out for Derek's house tomorrow. I grabbed my phone and dialed the bank. Hi, yes. I'd like to cancel an automatic transfer. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The November sun barely touched the tops of the trees outside my window. I sat on the edge of my bed, rubbing the back of my neck, staring at the framed photo of Rose that always sat on my nightstand. Her smile never changed. Neither did her eyes the same warm, steady gaze that had grounded me through 34 years of marriage, 2 children, and more sacrifices than I could count. I wondered what she would think of what I'd done last night. Would she call it overdue? Would she worry? Maybe both. I made coffee. Strong, black. No cream, no sugar. I carried it to the study, where the filing cabinet stood like a quiet monument to a decade of unspoken generosity. With a sigh, I pulled open the top drawer and began sorting. The first folder I opened was labeled 2011-2013. Mortgage support. Each payment was logged with the date, amount, check number, and memo line. I'd even printed copies of each bank statement showing the transfers. $2,750 a month. Every month. For 12 years. I flipped through them like I was reading someone else's life story. Every slip of paper was a memory I'd paid for in silence. There were tuition invoices for Mia's private school, school supply receipts, laptop purchases, soccer uniforms. Each receipt was its own confession. 1,000 small ways I tried to make sure they never felt the absence of their mother or the weight of their own responsibilities. In a red folder labeled Medical and Emergency, I found the hospital bills from when Derek had appendicitis and lost his job in the same week. I'd covered their insurance gap, $8,000. In a yellow folder, there were invoices for Allison's MBA program. She never told me how much it cost, but I knew. I'd written the checks, quietly, willingly. Back then, I believed in investing in their future. But now, I was starting to understand the difference between helping and rescuing. It took me 2 hours to lay out everything on the desk in neat columns. I calculated again slowly, carefully. Sibay Bashar, Ling. That was the number. Not an estimate. A ledger of truth. And that didn't include the cost to myself. I pulled out another folder, one labeled Personal. Inside were brochures I used to keep hidden in a drawer. A Mediterranean cruise Rose and I had talked about. An art retreat in Santa Fe. A woodworking masterclass in Oregon. All canceled, all deferred, all quietly abandoned because each year, someone else needed something more than I did. I'd downsized my home to a modest 2-bedroom so I could send Mia to summer camp. I'd driven the same Ford pickup since 2009 so Derek could lease a new electric SUV. I'd skipped vacations and home repairs, and even a few medications just to keep up the transfers. Now it was time to reinvest. Not in them, in myself. I opened my laptop and sent an email to my financial advisor. Subject: Redirection of monthly transfers. Hi, James. Effective immediately, please cancel all scheduled transfers to Derek Foster and Allison Foster. I'd like to reallocate those funds into my retirement and travel portfolio. Let's schedule a call this week to review next steps. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in years, the silence in the house didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. But that peace didn't last long. At 10:42 a.m., my phone rang. Caller ID, Derek. I let it ring. It rang again at 10:57, then again at 11:12. I didn't answer. At 11:25, I received a text. Dad, just got a call from the bank. Something's wrong with the mortgage auto pay. Please call me. 5 minutes later, another message. This isn't funny. At 11:34, a third message. We need to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time, then finally replied. Nothing's wrong, just making some adjustments. We can talk later. At 12:15, the doorbell rang. It was Beth. She stood there holding a casserole dish and wearing the same worried expression she'd had since childhood whenever someone raised their voice or when she forgot to study for a test. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside and led her into the kitchen. I brought that chicken broccoli thing Mom used to make, she said, setting the dish on the counter. Figured you might need something to eat. I nodded, appreciating the gesture more than I could say. She sat down and looked at me across the table. What happened last night, Dad? You were there, I said calmly. You saw it. Derek's been calling me nonstop. He says you're pulling the plug, that you're cutting them off cold. I took a deep breath. Beth, it's been 12 years. I kept every record. Mortgage, tuition, insurance, car payments, groceries, summer camps. Over $780,000. Her jaw dropped slightly. That can't be right. It is. I have the files if you want to see them. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at her hands. I didn't realize it was that much, she whispered. Neither did they, I said. Because I never made them see. I paused, then added. You've always thanked me, Beth. You and Roger, you've struggled, but you've also made it work. You didn't assume anything. Derek, he stopped saying thank you a long time ago. Her eyes welled up. He's scared, Dad. He's not saying it, but he is. They've built their whole life on the idea that you'd always be there. They're not ready for this. They should have been ready 10 years ago, I said. There was silence for a long time. Finally, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing. I know it doesn't feel good, but it's the only thing that will wake him up. I nodded slowly. Beth stood, grabbed her coat, and turned back at the door. Don't give up on him, okay? He's your son. I won't, I said. But I won't keep enabling him either. After she left, I warmed up the casserole, poured a glass of water, and sat at my kitchen table. Alone, but not lonely. At 2:47 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was Allison. Mark, I don't know what's going on, but Derek is losing it. He's on the phone with the mortgage company. They said the payment bounced. We're short this month. I know. What do you mean you know? I stopped the transfer. You can't just mark. The payment's due. What about Mia's school? She's got a project due this week. I'm aware. There was silence on the line. Then, her voice changed softer, but angrier. Why now? I looked out the window at the sun starting to dip behind the evergreens. Because last night, your husband stood in my house, drinking my wine, and told me I didn't matter anymore. And I realized I'd spent over a decade proving him wrong the wrong way. She didn't respond. I continued. Mia will be okay. I'll make sure of that. But you and Derek? You'll need to learn what it means to stand on your own. I ended the call. Outside, a storm was rolling in from the mountains. The clouds were heavy, gray, curling over the peaks like a slow-moving tide. Inside, I felt something I hadn't in a very long time. Control. By Sunday morning, the phone had stopped ringing, but the silence was louder than any voicemail. I spent most of the day reorganizing my files, not because I needed to, just because it gave my hands something to do while my mind adjusted to this new reality. I wasn't surprised that Derek hadn't called again. His silence was always louder when he felt cornered, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. At 11:03 a.m., I received a call from Aunt Marianne, Rose's only sister. We hadn't spoken in months, not since Mia's last recital. "Mark," she began without pleasantries, "I heard you cut off Derek and the kids. Is it true?" Her voice held an edge I hadn't heard since the day I forgot to invite her to our 20th anniversary party. "I didn't cut anyone off," I said calmly. "I ended my financial support. There's a difference. You know how people talk. Words already going around the church. They're saying you're letting the house fall into foreclosure, that Mia might have to leave school." I rubbed my temple, willing away the frustration building in my chest. "Have you heard how much I've paid over the last 12 years? No, of course not. Over $780,000, Marianne. Mortgage, tuition, medical bills, vacations, car leases. Quietly, every month, every year." Silence. Then, "That can't be true. I have the records. Every check. Every transfer. I didn't know." Her tone softened. "They never said a word." "Exactly," I said. "They never said a word." After we hung up, I sat back in my chair, staring at the sunlight dancing on the wall through the lace curtains Rose had sewn years ago. Even she, the most forgiving woman I've ever known, wouldn't have tolerated the entitlement that had grown in our son. I remembered something she once said at a PTA meeting, when Derek was in high school and had forgotten his science project. "Helping doesn't mean doing it for him," she'd whispered to me as we watched other parents carry dioramas and poster boards. "He won't grow if we carry the weight for him." Back then, I'd agreed. But somewhere along the way, I forgot. And now Derek had built a life on my shoulders, then mocked me for stooping under the load. That afternoon, while I was sweeping leaves off the porch, my neighbor Joe Garvey walked over. Joe was a good man, retired firefighter, 2 knee replacements, and a tendency to speak before he thought. "Mark, mind if I ask you something?" he said, leaning on the railing. "Go ahead. Heard from someone at the country store that your son's in trouble. Mortgage problems. Kids' school. Said you stopped helping." I didn't flinch. "That's true. People are talking like you just dropped them cold, that you're punishing the kids." I nodded slowly, then walked into the house and returned with a manila envelope. Inside were photocopies of checks, transfer statements, itemized lists of tuition, medical coverage, even the bill for Allison's second car. I handed it to him. "Take a look," I said. Joe flipped through the pages, his eyes widening with each one. "Jesus, Mark. This is almost $1 million. Exactly $782,000, I said. Over 12 years. He sat on my porch bench, stunned. "They never said." "No one ever does," I replied. "People don't talk about generosity unless it stops." He handed the envelope back slowly. "Damn. You're not punishing them. You're waking them up." "I'm trying." Joe stood up, his back cracking audibly. "If anyone else asks, you want me to tell them the truth? I'm not hiding anything." He gave me a firm nod and walked back across the lawn, muttering something about entitled kids these days. The next morning, Allison showed up. She was alone. No makeup, no heels, no perfectly curled hair. Just jeans, sneakers, and a sweatshirt with the company logo from her old part-time job at the library. She looked exhausted. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside and motioned her to the kitchen. She sat at the table, folding and unfolding her hands like they were a puzzle she couldn't solve. "I didn't know how deep it went," she said softly. "Derek never told me how much you were covering. I thought the mortgage was just a temporary help, that you'd stopped years ago." "I never stopped," I said, "because he never stood up." She stared down at her hands. "The mortgage is due in 5 days. We don't have it. I've applied for 2 jobs already, one at the community center, one at the bookstore." I nodded. "That's a good start. I wanted to say I'm sorry." That caught me off guard. She looked up, her eyes tired but honest. "For ignoring the help, for assuming it would always be there, for not stopping him when he spoke to you like that. I knew it was wrong. I was just embarrassed." I sat across from her. "I appreciate you saying that." She paused. "Mia's scared. She keeps asking if we'll have to move, if she'll have to leave her school." "She won't," I said. "I'll cover Mia and Oliver's tuition, their medical expenses, their essentials, but I won't fund adult lifestyles anymore. No cars, no mortgages, no vacations." Allison nodded slowly. "That's fair. More than fair." I stood up and reached for the pot of coffee. "You want a cup?" She gave a soft laugh. "God, yes." We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee like we had once, long ago, when she and Derek were first married and still came by on Sundays without any agenda. Before she left, she turned to me at the door. "He's angry. He's calling it betrayal. But deep down, I think he knows this is on him. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She walked back to her car, a used Subaru now, not the sleek SUV. I'd once helped her lease, and I stood there watching, the wind tugging gently at the hem of my flannel shirt. A storm was coming, but it wasn't mine anymore to stop. The gossip reached me before the fallout did. On Wednesday morning, while waiting in line at the hardware store, I overheard two women whispering near the gardening aisle. And now he's letting the house go. Can you imagine? After all he's done for the neighborhood. I thought he was more responsible. I didn't say anything, didn't turn around, but their words sliced through me like a dull knife. They weren't talking about Derek. They were talking about me. By the time I got to the counter, Ralph, the clerk I'd known for 15 years, looked up with a hesitant smile. "Morning, Mr. Davis," he said. Everything okay at home?" There it was. I offered a polite nod. "Just making some adjustments." He nodded quickly, like he regretted asking, then bagged my sandpaper and deck sealant without another word. Back in the truck, I sat for a few moments before starting the engine. The weight in my chest wasn't anger, it was disappointment. Not just in the town, or the whispers, or Derek, but in myself, because I'd let it get this far. I'd handed my son a life raft and watched as he built a yacht from it, then turned around and called me irrelevant. That afternoon, I received a visit from Janet Miller, a longtime family friend and one of Rose's old church companions. She didn't knock, just showed up with a lemon pie in one hand and judgment in the other. "I thought maybe you could use something sweet," she said, stepping into the kitchen uninvited. I accepted the pie, set it on the counter, and gestured to the table. "Coffee?" She sat down, her face already heavy with concern. "I had lunch with Marianne yesterday," she began. "Let me guess," I said. "She thinks I've abandoned my family." Janet folded her hands. "She said Derek told her the kids are terrified, that you're punishing them for his mistakes." I poured her a cup. "Did he mention the $782,000? Her hand stille. "Number. Did he mention I paid their mortgage for over a decade, their car leases, their medical bills, school tuition, even their family vacations?" Janet didn't answer. I sat down across from her. "This isn't punishment, Janet. It's correction. But the children are safe," I said firmly. "Their education and health are secure. But Derek and Allison have to live like adults now. That's not cruelty. That's parenting." Janet blinked, taken aback. Then her expression softened. "I suppose I never really understood how much you did for them." "No one did," I said. "Because I never asked for credit." She sipped her coffee slowly. "You know what Rose used to say about you?" I looked up. "What?" "She said you were the most stubborn man she ever loved. That once you made up your mind, not even heaven could move you." I smiled for the first time that day. She wasn't wrong. Janet left shortly after, leaving the pie behind and the conversation heavier than the sugar in the crust. The calls from Derek resumed Thursday. The first few I ignored. But the sixth one caught me while I was in the garage. "Dad," he snapped the moment I picked up. "This has to stop." "Hello to you too, Derek." "I'm serious. Mia cried herself to sleep last night. She thinks we're going to be homeless." "She won't be," I replied. "Not as long as I'm alive." He scoffed. "Then what is this? Some lesson? Some twisted punishment?" "No," I said. "It's the end of entitlement." He was silent for a moment. Then his voice dropped to that performative calm he used in business meetings. "You've embarrassed us. People are talking. At church, at work. Even Allison's friends are asking questions. And what are you telling them? That you've changed. That you're bitter. Or," I said, "you could tell them the truth. That for 12 years, your life was funded by your retired father. And the moment he said enough, you called it betrayal." The silence was sharp. "I didn't mean for it to come to this," he muttered. "You just blindsided us." I laughed once dry and tired. "Blindsided? Derek, I've been carrying this weight while you bragged about your self-made success. You didn't notice when the checks arrived, but now that they've stopped, suddenly I'm the villain?" His tone turned pleading. "We can't make the mortgage next week. I don't have a backup plan. You should have made one years ago." There was a beat. Then he said something that chilled me. "Mia said she thinks you don't love us anymore." I closed my eyes, the familiar ache pressing on my chest. "Tell Mia I love her more than anything in this world," I said. "And that's exactly why I'm doing this." He didn't respond. The line went dead. On Friday morning, I walked into Emerson Market, the only grocery store in town, to pick up a loaf of bread and some apples. Near the checkout lane, I saw Allison. wearing a navy vest with the store's logo, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She was scanning items while trying to manage a screaming toddler behind a customer's cart. She looked up, and for a split second, our eyes met. She didn't look away. She gave me a small nod, then continued working. I walked to a different lane, not out of shame but out of respect. She didn't need her father-in-law standing in line like a spectator. She needed space to reclaim her dignity. Back home, I sat on the porch with my ledger again. Not the one with numbers. The other one. The emotional one. It had no columns, no totals, no bank stamps. Just memories. Notes in my head. Promises I'd kept. Moments I'd missed. Gratitude never returned. And I thought, for the first time in years, maybe this was what starting over looked like. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, unshakable kind of way. The way you stop enabling people not because you don't love them, but because you finally realize what love really requires. Not endless giving, but honest boundaries. It was the sound of gravel crunching beneath old tires. That's what I heard Saturday morning, as I stood in my front yard, watering the roses Rose had planted years ago. The frost was clinging to the edges of the petals, but they were still holding on stubborn, like her. The old Chevy Malibu that Derek used in college rolled to a stop at the curb, a beat-up blue sedan that hadn't seen daylight in years. I didn't need to guess why it was back. The BMW was gone. Derek stepped out of the car. No suit, no polished shoes. Just jeans, sneakers, and a windbreaker that looked 2 sizes too big. He didn't speak. Just looked at me for a long time, as if trying to remember who I used to be. I spoke first. "You kept that car?" He gave a half laugh, half sigh. "All these years. Saturday in Allison's dad's garage. Never thought I'd need it again." I nodded slowly. "And yet, here it is." He walked up the path with his hands deep in his pockets, like a teenager coming home after breaking curfew. "Can we talk?" I led him into the living room. He didn't sit, just paced. "The house is in pre-foreclosure," he said. "We've missed 2 payments. The third is due Friday. After that," I waited. "We're out." He stopped pacing, and finally met my eyes. "I tried to get a loan. No one will co-sign. Allison's credit isn't strong enough, and mine." He trailed off. "You built a life on borrowed money and borrowed grace," I said softly. "Eventually, lenders come knocking." He swallowed hard. "I've been applying for jobs, marketing, sales, consulting, but the truth is my resume looks thinner than it should. I've inflated it so much over the years I don't even know what's real anymore." I didn't say anything. And Mia's school called. "We're 3 weeks behind on tuition. They gave us a warning. 1 more missed payment and she's out." He ran a hand through his hair, then sat down finally. "You were right," he said. "All of it." I waited. Not for the apology, but for the truth underneath it. I told people I was self-made, that I worked hard, that our success came from hustle. But it didn't. It came from you. And I never said thank you. Not once. Because I was too proud, too entitled. I sat across from him and rested my elbows on my knees. "Why now?" I asked. "Why say this now?" "Because I'm scared," he said honestly. "Not just about the house or the bills. I'm scared I've become someone Mia won't respect. Someone who expects the world but doesn't give anything back." He wiped his eyes. "And I think I might lose my marriage too. Allison's working part-time again. She's exhausted. She says she doesn't recognize me anymore." I studied him. The lines on his face were deeper. His voice cracked more than it used to. The armor was finally falling. "I'm not asking you to pay the mortgage," he said. I need to know what to do." I stood up, walked to my study, and returned with 2 envelopes. One labeled Mia and Oliver, education. One labeled Derek, conditions. I handed him both. "What's this?" he asked, cautiously. "In the first envelope is my commitment to your kids. I'll pay for their schooling, medical care, and extracurriculars. No questions asked. I already spoke with the school and made the back payment. Mia's safe." He opened it and stared at the signed agreement, his hands trembling. "And the second?" he asked. "That one's for you. A choice. If you want me back in your life not as a wallet, but as a father, you'll follow the conditions inside." He opened it and read silently. Then aloud. 1. Public acknowledgement. 2. Honest apology. 3. No more lifestyle support. 4. Monthly dinners. 5. Transparency, not transactions. He looked up. "You want me to write a public statement?" Yes. To the community. Facebook. Church bulletin. Wherever you told the lie, you correct it. I don't want praise. I want honesty. His face flushed. That's humiliating. No, I said. That's humility. He slumped back into the couch. I don't know if I can do that. Then you'll lose more than a house. You'll lose the one chance to rebuild what matters. Silence. Finally, he asked, can I think about it? You have until Tuesday. The foreclosure finalizes Friday. He stood up slowly, gripping both envelopes. At the door, he turned back. Dad, thank you. Not just for this, but for not giving up on me. I almost did, I admitted. But Rose wouldn't have forgiven me. He smiled faintly. She always saw the good in people. She also had a temper when pushed. I added with a smirk. He laughed. That she did. As he walked back to the beat-up Malibu, I saw something in his shoulders I hadn't seen in years. Weight. Real. Earned weight. That night, I sat in the study with Rose's photo beside me. I lit the candle she used to keep on her desk, the one that smelled like cedar and orange peel. I think he's beginning to get it, I whispered. Not because I helped him again, but because I finally stopped. Sunday morning arrived in a quiet way. No phone calls, no texts, no knocks at the door. Just the crisp Colorado air pushing gently through the curtains in the kitchen, and the hum of my old coffee maker spitting out its usual brew. I was halfway through my second cup when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found Allison standing there, wrapped in her gray cardigan, cheeks red from the cold. Is he here? I asked. She shook her head. Still asleep, or pretending to be. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat at the kitchen table like she'd done 100 times before, back when the kids were toddlers, and she'd bring over homemade muffins and photos from their school recitals. But there were no muffins this time. Only silence. I read the envelopes, she said finally. Both of them. Thank you. For covering Mia and Oliver. I didn't expect that. They're not the ones who failed to grow up, I said gently. They deserve security. She nodded. They're what we're fighting for. I waited, knowing what was coming. He's stuck, she said. Not because he doesn't want to apologize, but because he doesn't know how to be that version of himself. The one who admits he was wrong. He admitted it to me, I said. In private. Because you're his father. But public? That's a different mountain to climb. Then he needs to decide which is taller, his pride or his children's future. She gave a tired laugh. You always did have a way of cutting straight through the fog. I was an engineer, Allison. Precision was the job. She looked at me for a long moment. I think we need to sell the house. I didn't respond. It's too much. The mortgage is crushing. We can't keep up, even if you came back in full support, which you won't, and shouldn't. I nodded slowly. It's a beautiful house, I said. But it's not a home anymore, is it? Her eyes welled up. Not since we started pretending we earned it. That afternoon, I took a walk around the neighborhood. The trees were nearly bare now, the last stubborn leaves hanging on in desperate color. As I passed Mrs. Carver's house, she waved from her porch. Mark, she called. I heard your family's going through a tough time. I nodded. Some growing pains. I also heard your son's been humbled. Sometimes humility's the only path to grace. She smiled. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Thank you, I said. That makes one of us. That evening, Derek came alone. He didn't knock. Just stepped onto the porch and sat in the chair beside mine. We watched the sun set behind the hills without speaking. Finally, he said, I saw the house today with different eyes. The kitchen that Mom designed, the chandelier you installed for us, even the old swing set you built in the backyard. It's all pieces of you. Not me. You gave it life, Derek, but you never gave it roots. He nodded. I told Allison we should sell. I said nothing. She agreed. We're going to list it. Find something smaller, something we can actually afford. That's a good decision. He stared out at the fading sky. I'm going to write the letter. The public one? Yes, and I'll post it wherever I need to. Facebook, church bulletin, even LinkedIn, if that's what it takes. I smiled. Make sure it's honest. It will be. We sat in silence again. Not awkward, not heavy, just quiet understanding. I want you to know, he said, I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because I want my kids to remember me for earning their future, not borrowing it. That, I said, is the man I raised. He looked over at me then, tears pooling behind his eyes. I miss Mom. I do too, I whispered. Every day. He stood, pulled something from his coat pocket, and handed it to me. A photograph. It was one I hadn't seen in years. Rose, holding a baby Mia, with me crouched beside them, covered in sawdust from the deck I'd just built. "I found it in the garage," he said. "Figured you should have it." I stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it into my shirt pocket. "Thank you," I said. He stepped off the porch and turned back. "We're having the kids write thank you letters, too. Allison said it would help them understand what this all means." "That's a good start." "And the dinners," he added. "Monthly. Here, I'll bring dessert." I chuckled. "Just don't bring that lemon tart Allison tried last Christmas. She already promised never again." That night, I sat in my study with the photograph on my desk and a notebook in front of me. At the top of the page I wrote, "How to build something that lasts." And beneath it, "Set boundaries with love. Speak truth, even when it hurts. Let failure teach, not destroy. Give without losing yourself. Receive without forgetting gratitude. Because love isn't just about saying yes. Sometimes it's about finally learning when to say no." 3 weeks had passed since Derek handed me that photograph and said he'd write the letter. I didn't remind him, didn't follow up, didn't prod, because accountability only works if it comes from within. Instead, I watched as the for sale sign went up in front of their big 2-story home, with the bay windows and double garage. The same house I'd helped finance piece by piece through down payments, renovations, and repairs. The same house I used to walk into on holidays carrying pies and presents, never questioning if my name was written into the story they told others. I saw Allison raking leaves in the front yard while Mia and Oliver dragged out boxes from the garage. No movers, just a family, downsizing with dignity. They'd found a smaller house in the neighboring town. 1 story, 3 bedrooms, modest yard. Affordable, manageable, real. On a Thursday morning, Beth called. "They're actually doing it," she said, almost in disbelief. "Derek's listing things on Craigslist. They're selling the wine fridge, the massage chair, even the Peloton." I chuckled. Who's buying a used Peloton these days? Apparently someone with more ambition than sense. We laughed, for the first time in what felt like months. That weekend, I hosted our first monthly family dinner. Nothing fancy: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a simple apple crumble like Rose used to make. I set the table myself, folded cloth napkins, and lit the same candles we'd used for her last birthday. At 6 p.m. sharp, they arrived. Allison was holding a tray of brownies. Derek carried a bag of groceries. Mia and Oliver ran in ahead, arms full of construction paper and glue. "We made you something," Mia beamed, holding up a large poster. It read, "Thank you, Grandpa. You kept us safe." Each letter was cut from different colors, some crooked, some glittered. At the bottom were 2 hand-drawn stick figures, one with gray hair, holding 2 children's hands. Oliver shyly handed me an envelope. "It's my savings. I wanted to help pay for my soccer uniform." I knelt down, heartbreaking in the best way possible. "You keep your savings, kiddo. It means more that you offered." Allison helped me plate the food. Derek set the table. Mia handed out drinks. For the first time in years, there was no awkwardness, no tension. Just people doing things for each other without expectation. After dinner, as we sat in the living room, Derek cleared his throat. "I posted the letter," he said. "On Facebook, on the church bulletin board. Even emailed a copy to my coworkers." I raised an eyebrow. "And? I've had 5 people reach out saying they respected the honesty. One even said it made him rethink how he talks about his own father." I nodded, but said nothing. Then he added, "Would you like to read it?" He handed me a folded printout. "To our family, friends, and community, for over a decade, my father, Howard Davis, supported my family in more ways than anyone knew. Financially, emotionally, structurally. He paid our mortgage, our children's education, and countless needs we never earned but always accepted. We were proud, but not in the right ways. We let gratitude be replaced by expectation. And when he finally drew a line, we responded with blame, not reflection. This letter is not just an apology. It's an acknowledgement of the sacrifices we ignored, of the man who gave everything in silence. We are moving forward now with less material comfort, but with more humility, more truth, and more respect. Thank you, Dad. You didn't owe us anything, but you gave us everything. Asterisk. I folded it carefully and placed it beside me. That was honest, I said. He exhaled. I meant every word. In the weeks that followed, the changes held. Derek started working part-time for a small nonprofit that helped veterans transition into the civilian workforce. Less money, more meaning. He said it felt good to be needed for who he was, not just what he used to pretend to be. Allison picked up more hours at the bookstore. She'd lost weight from all the walking and lifting, but said she felt stronger than she had in years. Mia was thriving in school again. Oliver had joined a local youth soccer team. Their new house was smaller, yes, but it was warm, loud, and lived in. They sent me photos of their first home-cooked meal there. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Derek made the meatloaf. I printed the picture and taped it to the fridge. Right next to one from 2007 Rose holding Mia as a baby. Me with a saw in one hand, building the swing set behind them. On a chilly Thursday morning, Derek stopped by. He walked in without knocking, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might want one. We sat on the porch, sipping quietly. You ever think about how close we came to losing each other? He asked. Every day, I said. But I also think about how close we are now. He nodded, then added, I started writing again. Not just resumes actual writing. Stories, essays, stuff I used to love. That's good, I said. Might be time to build something of your own. I am, he said. This time with my own 2 hands. The first warm breeze of spring blew through my front yard the morning Mia knocked on my door. She wasn't with her parents. Just her and a canvas tote bag slung over one shoulder, hair braided, face flushed with excitement. I have a surprise, she said, barely able to contain herself. She led me outside and around the back, where the old tool shed still stood weather-worn, gray, but sturdy as ever. I want to build something, she said, and I want you to teach me. We spent the entire Saturday drawing out sketches for a treehouse. Not a big one, just something simple, practical, solid, a place for books and dreams and quiet thinking. The following weekend, we built the base. The weekend after that, the walls. And every weekend after that, we added one new thing: window frame, bookshelf, wooden ladder, shingled roof. Oliver helped stain the planks. Mia painted the inside pale blue and filled it with pillows. It became more than just a treehouse. It became a monument to rebuilding. 3 months after Derek and Allison moved into their new home, we held a backyard picnic to celebrate Oliver's birthday. Nothing extravagant, just grilled burgers, potato salad, and a chocolate sheet cake from the grocery store. Beth brought homemade lemonade. Roger manned the grill. Allison sat on a blanket with Mia, reading her poetry from a school project. And Derek, my son, stood beside me at the edge of the lawn, quietly watching his children laugh with the neighbors' kids. Feels different now, he said. It is, I replied. I used to think success was about appearance. The house, the car, the image. Now, he paused, shaking his head. Now I think it's about peace. I nodded. Took me decades to learn that. He looked at me. Took me nearly losing everything. Sometimes, I said. That's the only way we see what was holding us back. He sipped his iced tea, then added, I used to resent you when I thought you were controlling. But now I understand. Boundaries weren't rejection. They were rescue. I didn't respond right away. Just let the wind move through the trees. Then I said, I'm proud of you, Derek. He blinked fast. You are? I am. Not for what you built, but for what you let go of. That evening, after everyone left, I stood in my study and opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the one where I used to store every receipt, every record, every transfer. It was empty now, not because the work had vanished, but because the weight had finally been put down. I pulled out a fresh folder and labeled it with a black marker. Legacy. Inside, I placed a single photo, Mia and Oliver inside their treehouse, laughing. No price tag, no invoice, no proof of purchase. Just joy. That, I realized, was the inheritance I wanted to leave behind. Not money, but memory. Not control, but confidence. Not silence, but story. A week later, the church newsletter ran Derek's letter again, this time alongside a photo of him and Allison volunteering at the local food bank. Beth told me people still stop her in the store to say how much they admired our family's turnaround. I don't correct them. Let them call it whatever they want. But I know what it really was. Not revenge, not rebellion, but restoration. And that, I think, is the sweetest justice of all.